everyone, today's video is a cook with me. I am making the sausage tortellini skillet from Emily Bites. Recipe will be linked down below. If you like what you see here, give it a thumbs up, let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to my channel for more. So the first thing I need is 1 pound of Italian sausage. The recipe calls for spicy, but we don't do spicy in my household because my husband gets really bad heartburn. I bought sweet Italian sausage. This is actually turkey. Get that going and then go chop some veggies. So my Italian sausage is browning up here nicely, and before it is completely brown, I'm going to be adding some other ingredients here. I have 8 ounces of zucchini that is roughly diced. This is basically 1 large zucchini. And then I have 8 ounces of white button mushrooms. You could use any kind of mushrooms that you want, that I'm slicing up here. Once this meat is a little bit more brown, I'm going to be adding the zucchini and the mushrooms. I'm also going to be adding 1 15-ounce can of tomato sauce and 1 15-ounce can of petite diced tomatoes with the juice. The recipe calls for any kind of diced tomatoes. I prefer the petite just because the giant chunks of tomatoes are not my thing. I'm also going to be adding garlic. I buy pre-chopped minced garlic in a jar because I'm lazy. And I'm going to be adding onion. I also buy pre-chopped onion or frozen onion because I can't stand to chop fresh onion. It makes me cry. So it's going to be 2 garlic cloves, and it calls for 1 small onion. I usually do less than that. We're not nuts about onion in a whole bunch of things. I'm adding in the zucchini, 8 ounces diced, and the 8 ounces of mushrooms sliced. I'm also going to add in some onion. It calls for 1 whole onion, but again, we're not nuts about onions, so I'm going to add some, but not a lot, especially because this dice is really big. And then my garlic. In some of my prior videos you guys have seen, I saved these little plastic spoons from the yogurt place, and this is exactly where they come in handy, is digging things out of jars. So we're going to let that go a little bit longer, let this meat brown, let these vegetables get soft. Recipe says about 8 minutes. I'll check back. The recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of sliced fresh basil. My knife is not as sharp as I would like. I'm going to get together my tomato paste. My recipe calls for that. Calls for 1 cup of reduced fat mozzarella cheese. This Lucerne brand is the one that I found that is the least amount of points for the same serving. And it also calls for some grated Parmesan cheese. I have a little bit left on this rind, and then I have a fresh one here. I'm going to see how much I can get from this. I also just remembered, though, that I have just a teeny bit of Parmesan left in this container. I'm going to weigh it and see how much this is. The recipe calls for 1.5 ounces of Parmesan cheese. Got my scale here. That's a 1/2 ounce, so I'm going to use that. I'm going to grate some more Parmesan. I need another 1/2 ounce. Again, like I said, my next step is to add in my tomato sauce, my canned tomatoes, tomato paste. I buy it in the tube rather than the can because it's much more economical. You don't open a can and go, wow, what do I do with the rest of it? The fresh basil, some Italian seasoning, salt, the Parmesan I've grated, 1.5 ounces, and the tortellini. It calls for 20 ounces of cheese tortellini. So I'm going to add my diced tomatoes, my tomato sauce, my fresh basil, my Italian seasoning. Don't you hate it when your battery dies in the middle of filming? So I added the Italian seasoning and going to add the Parmesan cheese, and then I'm going to add the tortellini and the tomato paste. So the tortellini and the tomato paste are added in. I'm going to stir it up a little bit. I want to throw out there that the recipe says to make this in a large skillet. I would not recommend that because, as you can see, it makes a lot. Once all of this is together, I'm going to throw in a little salt actually. It's all stirred. I'm going to cover and bring the heat up and then reduce and simmer for 8 minutes. This has come up to a boil, so I'm going to stir it just a little bit. I've reduced my heat. I'm going to cover it and set my timer for 8 minutes. Okay, my timer just went off. So my next step in my recipe is to turn off the burner. Now the recipe says to take the lid off, sprinkle the 1 cup of mozzarella over the top and place the lid back on the pan and leave it on the warm burner until the cheese melts. I have an electric cooktop, as you can see, and I know from experience that even after I turn this burner off, that this thing is going to be hot. So anytime it calls for something along those lines, I take it completely off. Mozzarella's all on top. I'm going to put the lid back on and it is going to melt away, and that is it. This is the sausage tortellini skillet from Emily Bites. I'll link the recipe down below, and hope you guys enjoyed cooking with us.